transit that takes place on transit.
In this episode of On Transit, I visit the STPP, the Surface Transportation Policy Partnership Partners Workshop, Moving from the Margins to the Mainstream, and interview some of the people attending the workshop.
I'm Ann Canby, the head of the Surface Transportation Policy Project and Advocacy Coalition in Washington, D.C. And we're holding a series of workshops around the country, regional workshops, to help advocates and agency folks and others, local officials, understand better how to use federal transportation dollars to support and enhance and build livable communities, healthy, safe, walkable, transit-oriented communities.
My name is Steve Henniker. I'm the Executive Director of 1000 Friends of Wisconsin, and I'm here in the Twin Cities to get together with other transit advocates and transportation reform advocates to share ideas on how we might improve and better balance our transportation choices.
Today is a two-day training for transportation reform advocates called Moving from the Margins to the Mainstream, and it's really about how to use the federal transportation law that was just passed in July to help not only fund our needs here in Minnesota, but also how to catch the wave, so to speak, on some of the transportation reform ideas that are happening all over the country.
My name is Art Gazzetti. I'm with the American Public Transportation Association. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy there at APTA. We're the transit association that represents the whole transit industry, the transit systems around the country, etc., and gives them a voice in Washington. We're here because we're all partners, and this is one of a number of regional forums to try to look at the recent law that passed, Safety Lou, by name it's called. And Safety Lou provided $286 billion in a very substantial investment in our nation's transportation, roads and transit and bikeways, etc. We want to make sure those funds are spent in a way that provide communities with the choices they need to make their communities vibrant. Let's spend that money, spend it right.
We have folks from several states, in addition to Minnesota, from Wisconsin, from Iowa, from Illinois,
Missouri, as well as probably about 70 folks from here in Minnesota. And we've got a range of folks from the business community, community activists, staff of many of the agencies like MnDOT and Met Council and Metro Transit, and people from the healthcare community as well.
National organizations, Rails to Trails Conservancy, AARP representatives, American Society of Landscape Architects. So it's a real cross-section. Local officials from towns here in the metro area, the transit general manager from Duluth. So it's quite a variety of folks.
CTAA is a national organization, really hoping to help people have universal access and mobility, especially a lot of our elderly, persons with disabilities, and others who have no form of transportation and have a difficult time getting around. So we are very excited about the Safety Lou bill recently passed by Congress and signed by President Bush, and we're hoping that there'll be more mobility for people.
The underlying federal transit legislation that provides funding, considerable amounts of funding, I might add, to the states, primarily to the transportation agencies, and also to regional transit agencies that operate things like Metro Transit around the country. And we want to make sure that those dollars are spent in ways that support a broader set of choices for people.
My name is Jackie Grimshaw. I'm from Chicago, organization called the Center for Neighborhood Technology, and I'm here for this workshop on bringing the Safety Lou legislation to the community level so that people in communities understand what's in the law and how to use it to build better communities.
Every 7 years, the Congress reauthorizes the Transportation Act. It's one of the largest public works bills that happens ever in this country, and this was reauthorized 2 years late during the summer of 2005.
The language needed to tell the general public about it really hasn't even been invented yet. There's all these terms describing different pots of money and different channels it moves through. different levels of agencies and what triggers spending on one thing and who, who's eligible to spend something on something else, and it just gets totally complicated.
So we're all working here together, all the states in this particular region, to make sure that the monies are spent wisely and that we achieve the mobility that all Americans need, especially with the growth in the baby boom population. We really have a lot of struggles. Rising gas prices are a lot of concerns, and what's going to happen to those revenues and how are they going to be replaced. And just the Community Transportation Association is just one of the partners of many here wanting to help the cause.
The bottom line is, though, and our interest is, and indeed the federal law has provisions in it to make it more possible to get more bicycle trails, to get more buses and bus lines, to get more rail transit lines, to get more pedestrian facilities into our regular transportation system in the metro area in Minnesota. So that's where our focus lies in attending this conference, and I really think that's where the focus of a lot of people does lie.
Well, Transit for Livable Communities is a citizen, community-based advocacy organization here in the Twin Cities. We've got 10,000 members who all are people who support the idea of more transportation choices, and that's for a variety of reasons. It's both for better access, it's for reducing transportation expenses for families, it's for environmental reasons. But we're all folks that come together because we want change. We would like to see more choices, biking, walking, and transit, as well as well-maintained roads.
I'm Jay Skalbeck, and I'm with Hennepin County, but I'm here because I'm on the Hennepin County Bicycle Advisory Committee, where we are looking to expand the commuter and recreational access for all the Hennepin County residents, and trying to see what we can do to get people into alternative transportation and out of their cars.
We are co-sponsoring this conference. We're the local affiliate and partner with the Surface Transportation Policy Project, which is the national sponsor. And we've got probably about 50 of our members and leaders here today who are learning more about the federal law, learning lessons that they can take back to their neighborhoods and their communities. A really important value at TLC is having public participation. Unless we have community members involved from the beginning to the end in transportation projects, we don't think we're getting the best transportation projects we can get. So folks are learning here today, and we'll be working together to bring those back for action in their communities.
A lot of things that this workshop addresses is how to coordinate different types of human services communications, medical assistance communications, and regular transit, as well as road transportation and funding. And basically that's the area that I'm most concentrating on. I was trying to coordinate different modes and types of transportation for the betterment of mobility for everybody.
The main framework of this law says that the gas tax funds that are collected anytime anyone fills their car can be used for a range of expenditures, whether it's funding for roads or funding for transit like Hiawatha Light Rail here in town, funding our buses, funding bike paths like the Stone Arch Bridge here in the Twin Cities, and even helping to fund development projects that will make transit more useful and friendly. So there's a whole range of programs, and what many of us at this conference are here for is to talk about using more of that money for the alternatives that we think are needed in the 21st century, rather than simply using them to only expand highways at the margins of our cities.
It's not just our transportation policy that we're talking about here, it's also our energy policy. And there's been a lot of talk about the escalating cost of gasoline and how eventually we're going to have a little tipping point here where the automobile, while it's an important part of our transportation portfolio, there needs to be options to that. You might reach $3, $4, $5 a gallon. We have to make sure people have public transportation alternatives.
The reason I'm attending this conference is that I've been interested in transit for a long time, ever since I lived in Tokyo in the 1970s. And I recently moved back to Minneapolis after living in Portland, Oregon for 10 years.
I am a full-time bus user and bicyclist and pedestrian. We do have a car, but it stays in the garage almost all the time. And so, having done that for a number of years now, I have become personally exceedingly interested in building a system that can get me around without driving. So this is a gathering about all the arcane details of getting money from the federal government and matching it with money from the state government and all that kind of stuff. And it all gets very technical and convoluted and complicated. But the bottom line is, the more I know and the more we know about it, the more buses we're going to have running in the Twin Cities, the more trains we're going to have, the more bicycle paths we're going to have, and the better that is for me. So I don't want to be completely selfish about it, but I see it as a matter of individual rights.
My name is Dean Elstead. I'm the Recycling and Trails Coordinator for the City of Minnetonka. And this conference was an opportunity for me to find out a little bit more about the funding process. We rely heavily on Hennepin County for their assistance in providing the off-road trails and the sidewalks. They're very committed to the multimodal aspect of it.
My name is Jade Nagel, and I'm from Des Moines, Iowa, and I'm with 1,000 Friends of Iowa, and I'm their transportation coordinator. And what we do is we educate citizens about responsible land use.
We have 2 light rail transit corridors in Minnetonka that we're part of, and so that's a 15.5-mile corridor that's owned by Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority. And so it was an old railroad bed, so that's part of the trail system that we have. And I got a DNR grant for $62,000 to help with my boardwalk project as we try to complete our loop trail system, which being a second ring city from in the metropolitan area here, we have a lot of problems with, it's already built up, the land's already taken. So as we look forward, as redevelopment comes, we're able to sometimes get an easement for a trail to complete some of these missing parts of our system. Our original idea was to try to connect our 5 big regional parks with trails, and mostly off-road trails. We're moving now to provide people information about how they can get around town, walking or biking, using off-trail and on-road systems in our new map that will be coming out in about a month, so that people can do their utilitarian trips, but also their recreational, get them out of their cars, on their feet, on the bike, so that they'll actually, maybe have a little healthier life and a family activity, and even maybe use it to visit friends and neighbors or make their shopping trips.
The Center for Neighborhood Technology is, we're kind of an innovation lab. We like to look at urban problems and try and develop tools and technologies to help make them more sustainable.
We are a land use group in Wisconsin. We work on issues of promoting sustainable communities and making sure that our transportation options reflect what our communities really need to be sustainable. And so when we get to issues like sprawled out development, we think that destroys communities as well as the landscape, and also makes several transportation options like mass transit virtually impossible.
Well, my name is Fred Bartle, and I've been involved in transit and transportation issues in Madison, Wisconsin for about 8 years. And I'm here at the conference mainly because I'm trying to find out as much as I can about the federal regulatory and legal landscape for funding transportation projects, which we're hoping to get going on in Madison fairly shortly. We've got a couple of major projects going on. We've got a mayor who's interested in streetcars, we've got a county executive who's interested in commuter rail, and we also have a bus system that's trying to find innovative ways of keeping going. And all those things keep us very busy with transit in Madison.
And some of the transportation issues, we unfortunately we're a bit behind the curve, where our plans pretty much consist of more road building, and we're not really investing in transportation systems within the city, which is what we'd like to see the funds shifted. But some of the problems that we're dealing with are these decisions being made to appease just a handful of people as opposed to supporting the community as a whole.
I'm Dennis Jensen. I'm the general manager of the Duluth Transit Authority, and I guess I'm here just to kind of take a peek at some of the future issues that we're going to be dealing with in Duluth. They always have a way of trickling up there from the metro area, so we know what's coming.
I'm the MPO Planning Program Coordinator for the Minnesota Department of Transportation. MPOs are metropolitan planning organizations, and federal law requires transportation planning be done in any metropolitan area that has a 50,000 population or higher that's at an urban density. And so my job is to help make sure that they get the federal funds to enable that work, and also kind of make sure that the work's being carried out consistent with federal guidelines.
My name is Mel Henderson. I'm the Director of Transportation for the Mid-America Regional Council. We're a council of governments and the MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, for the bi-state Kansas City region. I'm here because we're trying to understand better the relationship in our community between land use and the transportation decisions that we make, and was looking for information to kind of get our thought process going around that topic.
In recent years, the chapter membership has indicated that it is most interested in the main investments of the transit system, such as North Star Commuter Rail. That was our top legislative priority last year. And now the Central Corridor.
My name is Daniel Kravitz. I work at Aurora St. Anthony Neighborhood Development Corporation, and I am here to learn about policy that can benefit the community in impacting LRT development on University Avenue.
The transit services a diversity of incomes and should service a diversity of incomes.
My name is Uni Nambudripad. I'm an organizer for the Alliance for Metropolitan Stability. We are a coalition of faith-based environmental, transit, and affordable housing groups, and we work on broad regional development. We're very interested in transit and expanding the transit system. We also look at the economic and racial impacts of the issues that we work on, and so we're very interested in getting more involvement from low-income communities and communities of color, and also bringing a racial justice perspective to the work that we do.
I'm Phyllis Russell. I work with an organization called Work Welfare and Families. It's a statewide coalition that does public policy around low-income families issues. And I'm here because one of the issues that we find come up again and again is transportation. And we spent probably the last 5 years trying to develop some two-sided expertise. One side is understanding the arcane world of transportation and transit planning, which I've still not done. And the other side is to use our abilities and skills as facilitators.
I'm part of a collaborative effort called the Central Corridor Equity Coalition. And our efforts are basically to A, provide information, and B, provide roads of impact, ways to impact the LRT development. So the information has primarily been community meetings where we bring in experts to talk to the community, give information about things like, the benefits of Hiawatha Line, the types of things that have been going on in other places in the country, like Salt Lake City, Portland, Seattle. And then also to talk about places where they can have an influence.
My personal bottom line, and I think the Sierra Club's bottom line, is rail transit can be good for everybody. We just have to make it that way.
I've been hearing from the community I work in, which is the Aurora St. Anthony neighborhood, part of the Summit University neighborhood in St. Paul. I've been hearing primarily negative responses to the LRT development. One thing I'm hearing is that it's going to displace residents just like the highway did when they built it through Rondo 50 years ago. And people are worried that gentrification will occur, so it will be a displacement of a different type. Also worried about safety, worried that if they do build it, they won't put stops in the places where the community really needs it. There are really a lot of concerns right now.
If everyone comes together and works hard, we can find ways to make sure that those who live there now continue to live there, that there's affordable housing for new people of moderate or low income, that the small businesses that are there now continue to be there. I just think these are problems that we can solve. And if we decide right now, out of fear, that they're not solvable, then what we do is shoot ourselves in the foot, because the Twin Cities metro area needs a metro-wide transit system, not one line on Hiawatha and one line on North Star commuter rail. It needs a metro-wide system. I think it would be tragic and very sad if we got polarized on this and it had to wait another few years or didn't happen at all, because that just isolates people, it separates people.
Remember, most of our transit work is really about public transit, so it's not about bike paths, it's not about roads, it's about we can't get from this spot in our community where the bus drops us off to this spot in our community 9 blocks away where we have to make the next connection. So can we please just fill in that gap? Or in Elgin, you know, there's no bus that goes from here to the community college. How in the heck are students supposed to get to the community college? There's a third one in another area, Aurora, where there's been huge commercial development, and it's all big box stores. Those are low wage jobs, yet there was no mass transit along that major strip. So those are the kinds of things that when you sit people down and say, let's look at this map, let's look at your community, where are you, where are you trying to get to, those are the things that tend to come up.
Kansas City has a very highway-oriented transportation network. We have the 5th largest road network per capita in the country. And we have, I believe, the largest number of freeway miles per capita of any major metropolitan area in the country. Much of our freeway system was developed under assumptions that we would be a much larger region population-wise by this time than we actually are. Our transit system is fairly thin. It's not been well supported financially. Where service exists, it's good service. There's just a lot of our region that has very little, if any, transit service available.
A very limited transit system, that's for sure. We have a pretty integrated trail system from the west side to the downtown area, but once you get past that, there's you know, some work to be done in that way. And then as far as other modes of transportation, we don't have bike lanes or anything yet, but these are the sorts of things that we're working on in making sidewalks safer.
What Tokyo and Portland had in common, even though they're very different cities otherwise, is that in both cities it was easy to live without a car. And the factors that made this possible were good links among the different forms of transit, frequency of service. I mean, in Tokyo the trains run every 3 minutes during rush hour. They're not quite up to that speed in Portland, but during rush hour, they're 5 to 10 minutes, and they've been putting together corridors that have very frequent service 7 days a week. And so you can pretty much depend on finding a bus within a few minutes when you step out to the bus stop.
Transit will be used, no doubt about it. You give people a good choice. People are going to do what's best for them in a logical basis. If transit is a good choice for them, they'll use it. If transit is not a particularly good choice, meaning if it's a bus that might come by once every hour, that's not always a good choice. But if it's a good service, one that's regular, one that's attractive, one that's convenient, one that's affordable, transit will be the choice. Now, tying that back to the land use connection, that goes back to community design. A lot of time we wonder why maybe people might use autos for a good portion of their trips. A lot of time that's because the design of the transportation system is one that is designed around the automobile. So it's important we have the land use connection that fosters the transit alternative.
Well, one of the things that people are wanting to try and explore and understand better is just how federal funds can be used, what kind of things they're eligible for, how flexible they are, and we talked about that a bit this afternoon, and how to fund things like bike paths and more transit and transit operating assistance. And this morning we talked about ideas for designing roads and streets to be more supportive of the neighborhoods and areas through which they pass, to enhance them rather than just run through them.
We talked a lot today about the problem of getting community people to engage in transit issues, that's what we do. We create community tables, we help them work through, learn enough to talk about what they want and need in their community. Then we go to the next stage. Well, then how do you re-engage back into that arcana of transit and get something done?
And I'm concerned about the impacts of policymakers and decision makers not representing the communities that they are making decisions for, and so there will be a feeling and, well, I guess a reality that decisions will be made by not by the communities that are being impacted.
Now, especially for low-income people, Medicaid transportation is very limited. It's being cut in most states. There's no provision for Medicare transportation. It's for ambulances only, which is very expensive. So there's just a lot of need for rural transportation. There are some transit systems in urban areas, but very little or more expansion is needed, especially in rural areas of the nation. So it's just a lot of unmet needs everywhere for the populations and the average American who needs to get up and go. And we're very positive that there's been an increase in the utilization of public transit in general because of the rise in gas prices. So we anticipate that will happen also. But the infrastructures need to be replaced, upgraded, and some need to be created, especially in rural areas.
When they created the bus system, they basically retraced the roots of the old streetcar system, which was built in the days when Minneapolis and St. Paul were totally separate worlds. And so there's a bunch of routes centered on downtown Minneapolis and another bunch of routes centered on downtown St. Paul, and they don't really connect with each other very well. I mean, one reason I have to drive here in the Twin Cities is that if I want to go to something in St. Paul, if I try to do it by bus, I may have to go all the way down to downtown St. Paul and then out again.